Hello, my name is Richard Curran-Trussell, Philosophy faculty. Welcome to our program today. You know, from rather modest beginnings, the human race has succeeded wildly on planet Earth, and I think perhaps for two reasons. One is our minds. There are animals that are faster than us, more powerful, with keener senses, but we survive by our wits. Secondly, the human beings are what scientists call an ultrasocial species. In other words, we have the capacity for complex division of labor, much like ants and bees. We can have specialized skills and then come together and accomplish fantastic tasks as a community compared to solitary individuals. But unlike bees and ants, we do not have a hive mentality. We're highly self-aware. We think for ourselves. And so there are a lot of challenges to persuade people to come together for a common task. And that's kind of the focus of our program today. Reasoning, there are a lot of things that influence us, and not all of them connect with our minds and our reasoning ability. So we're going to be first focusing on some techniques that influence our judgment, called rhetorical devices that influence our judgment, often on an unconscious level. We'll also be discussing fallacies, which indeed are errors in reasoning. Fallacies masquerade as arguments, purporting to give good reasons for a conclusion of how we should be, what we should do, and how we should do it. So anyway, today we have two guests from my logic classes, Douglas Wilcox and Elizabeth Tavera, and they are both students here at Pikes Community College. Just in passing, Elizabeth is a veteran of the U.S. Army, and both of them are involved in student government, essentially representing 19,000 students here at Pikes Peak Community College. And so, Doug, if you could just get us going a little bit, talking about fallacies or rhetorical devices and how you see them operating.
Well, one of the things I see a lot are the fallacies, and we often see many of the fallacies throughout just everyday conversations. Most people think of these fallacies when they are seeing political debates, and a lot of our political candidates, and all the way from the federal government all the way down to the local government, we see people using the rhetorical devices as well, but mainly the fallacies. They can even be in simple conversations between friends and colleagues, including in student government. There are times when people will appeal to emotions and get very in depth, and you can see it getting heated and appealing almost to someone's pity by saying like, oh well, we had this particular person who was a veteran who was who actually it was an amputee, and they had slipped on the ice because they were on crutches and actually hurt their other knee. And using this anecdotal story basically kind of helped us understand that this person felt very serious about the safety issues that we have during the winter season.
Okay, yeah, that's a real life example from student government. Elizabeth, how have you observed either rhetorical techniques or fallacies in our culture or in your experience?
Yes, in my opinion, I believe that, or I think that it goes on everything, like my personal experience, even with school, like you get related to some other things, some other classes. For me, like it's a good experience for me to kind of transfer my philosophic logic class to like my English class. It kind of makes me like kind of understand more my critical thinking. And same thing, like everyone like talks about fallacies, and like it's everywhere, like.
Okay. Any specific examples of fallacies?
Like pretty much one of the example of like rhetorical devices. It's like repetition. We see repetition like on everything pretty much, like commercials. We also see those like in speeches. For example, Martin Luther King, like I have a dream. Yes. So it's like he keeps repeating every single time, I have a dream, I have a dream. So that's.
Yeah, a good point with repetition. I mean, even when you're training a dog or raising a child, you reinforce the lesson. You repeat over and over again values and how to do things. And you get it in your mind by repeating it. Flashcards, are kind of the same way in learning a language or mathematical problems. So that repetition we're sort of hardwired to get that in our minds through repetition. And if people repeat a certain phrase or buzzword or something often enough, it influences how we think, and we're even kind of unaware of it. Any other examples of repetition, or what are some other rhetorical devices, maybe, or fallacies?
Well, hyperbole is one definitely hear that often from certain people who like to use that particular rhetorical device to get their point across. I had a grandfather who was definitely loved using hyperbole in all his situations to kind of express his political views and his social views on how society should be run. I mean, if he didn't agree with a group of people, he would usually say they should probably be all put in a ship and launched into another iceberg or something like that, because he was from that era. So
the Titanic or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
What a character. Yeah. And those kind of rhetorical devices do catch your attention. You listen to.
But of course, he didn't really mean it. I mean, obviously, it was a terrible tragedy, and but this was it. And a lot of time you do see where people will use hyperbole, and then you'll actually watch them take a big step back and say, "This is actually what I really, this is what I really mean out of this situation."
Okay, so exaggeration,
exactly.
just extreme exaggeration. Yeah, that happens. Another area I think a rhetorical device is stereotyping. Our lives are so complex, and there's so many people involved that we sort of have to group things together and make kind of snap judgments and put things in. Aristotle would call them classes, like categorical statements, all this or that, or some this or that. And address stereotypes, perhaps, in how you've seen them used or abused, or there can be positive stereotypes too, right? Well,
yeah, and so definitely in student government, you want to get an idea that everybody's on an even keel, and you want to give everybody a chance to kind of speak their own piece, but you do realize that you can kind of stereotype somebody as somebody's got a bunch of books out and stuff like that. Probably you're not going to be too interested in student government, as opposed to somebody who's just kind of standing around, not having much to do, that sort of thing. And stuff is somebody who's going to be more approachable than somebody else.
Yeah.
Somebody who's kind of got a grumpy look on their face and they're looking down on the ground is probably not somebody we're going to approach right away. So there are kind of little stereotypes we do like that, but our mind can only handle so much, at a time. So.
Yeah. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground here, or starting to. We're going to switch the topic over to our second segment and a few other guests in a minute. So thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Mom, I gotta let you go. Pull over right now! Get back here! Good eye, son. Got him.
Put your nightmares to rest. PPCC's flexible online evening and weekend classes are a dream come true.
College is a great gig, man. It's a place where you can take something you're good at and get even better, maybe even great. My folks used to dog me about how much time I spent locked in my room working on my riffs. But now that I'm getting my degree and maybe going on to teach music someday, they're singing a whole different tune. What can I say? College rocks.
Don't just settle for getting along in life. Get ahead. Enroll now for spring classes starting January 20th. Visit ppcc.edu online for details. Pikes Peak Community College.
It's your life. Make it count.
shouldn't be out alone. You should be taking evening classes at PPCC.
Welcome back to our second segment, and we have two other guests joining us to expand the conversation on the use of reason and critical thinking. Both of them are Pikes Peak Community College students enrolled in Logic, and we have Richard Schottler and Ray Reyes here with us today. And just in passing, they are both veterans. Richard from the U.S. Marines and Ray from the U.S. Army. So we're glad to have you here. And, you know, as with this ultra-social species we're having to use critical thinking and cooperate to accomplish a whole lot and deal with persuasion techniques. And there seems to be just bombarded, especially in modern times, with the information from the media, social media, TV, radio, the information age. And I think, well, let's have that as our starting point. How do we kind of navigate Richard, you've been kind of focusing on this area. Why don't you start us off?
Well, yeah, like you said, we are living in the information age. I saw a report from IBM that says we create 2.5, I can't even think of the term. It's such a big
gigabytes,
number.
terabytes.
Yeah, it's so much information that we're each generating on a regular basis. And how do we deal with processing the credibility of the sources, the information that we're processing? And critical thinking really plays a big part in sorting all that out. Like you mentioned, we have 24-hour news networks, we have social media that's up all the time, and a lot of claims that are being made all the time, and you have to be able to decide what you're going to accept and what you're going to reject and use for living the good life.
Any guidelines on how to do that? Yeah, it's a challenge, but what might be some practical ways, or how does critical thinking or reasoning help us navigate that? You can jump in anytime you want.
Well, yeah, I was finding it kind of, I little chuckled a little bit because I kind of found it ironic that he mentioned the good life, which is the good life. There's so many aspects towards that, and we were doing a discussion in one of my classes about what is the aspect of the good life as it appears towards philosophy as political science. And mine, of course, my baby's always been intellectual diversity. It's always what I like to expand on. And my aspect of the good life is focused on intellectual diversity, and that's pretty much defined in my terms as being able to have a discussion through discourse with a different view of ideas rather than having a diverse group of people that are racially diverse or virtue values. I find those two values very counterproductive, not because they're bad, but because they're counterproductive in finding solutions. Whereas intellectual diversity, I believe it's you can pretty much apply it to anything. And as far as the critical thinking, the information age, intellectual diversity is just pretty much taking every option into consideration. Like Aristotle once said, and the quote that I love to use is it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to accept a thought without accepting it. So that pretty much just covers everything. So that's pretty much what.
Okay, yeah. I think it used to be easier in the old days if we go back in human history. There was the wisdom of the elders. We would listen to kind of those authoritative voices, people who had a lot of experience under their belt in our tribe, our clan, our family. The wisdom of the ages, the voice of experience speaking. And now we have so many voices coming at us that it's harder to navigate that. So a lot of people claim authority positions now. They're dressed up in certain uniforms or costumes, Supreme Court judge or police officer, doctor, that gives them authority in certain spheres. And we take those cues seriously, and we probably should. If somebody pulls me over on the street and they're dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, I'd be a lot more wary than if they're, in the full. I don't like those red lights flashing, but at the same time, I'd rather be stopped by that official, then there's somebody flagging me down, you know.
Right.
And so how do we establish credibility, you know, in this day and age with various sources? You know, you can't always trust somebody in the media or somebody in a position of authority in politics or the clergy or any others. So any guidance on that?
As far as establishing credibility, you can go, it would depend on what age you're living in, really. If you look back at Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I should say, he was very famous for using just extravagant words that nobody would normally use, even in his letters and stuff, like the letter to Birmingham jail. He used very educated words, and he actually came out and admitted he used those words to gain credibility so that people would actually listen, and he wasn't just somebody coming off the streets and speaking. So that gave him that credibility of being educated, being intelligent. You know, it's just really would depend on the time of age we are now. And now what he was talking about, or Rich was talking about, was the information age. So he's just got so many different sources out there. It will take a lot of critical thinking just to break that apart.
So even the language that a person uses, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, right. So being a reverend gave him a lot of credibility within certain communities. But doctor, he had his PhD. Right. Clearly he was highly educated. And so he wasn't ashamed of that. It established his credibility.
I think what we're learning in school is how to do research, and that's a key part of critical thinking and checking the credibility of sources is, and like Ray said, the Aristotle quote, to entertain an idea without fully accepting it, that when you get new information come across your table, that you don't just file it away and that fits with my worldview. You gotta have a little bit of skepticism and say, hey, how credible is this claim? And there's the information's out there, but it requires a little bit of footwork to get out there and hunt down where these claims coming from, who compiled the data, and are we looking at facts and data and not just opinions?
Good point. And I think that, you know, not only is it coming to us from the media, which is kind of, you know, been a large focus of yours, but just our own upbringing, our social inheritance, our background, the values, the beliefs we were raised with. At some point we accept those, you know, from our parents, our, you know, caregivers, our culture. But at some point we need to kind of review that to fully make them our own. And some people never question that, and some people are kind of threatened when you begin to challenge that.
Right. And as far as the media, because that's what you were mentioning about as well, was that the media will put what sells, because eventually at the end of the line it's a business, so you know they want to make money. So I mean, you can say Aristotle was right that, you know, humans are just more prone to conflict, so they're going to show conflict regardless of where it's at. So that's one aspect we probably need to address, not only to the media but just society as a whole. Like, hey, you know, this is where the problem is. We love conflict. This is what we dwell on. We want it more, so that's why the media shows that. So of course they're going to be biased in that aspect. That's just one aspect we got to figure out how to fix.
Yeah, and that's something about I think we talked about in class. Psychology has shown that we pay more attention to negative information than positive. Right. As a group of people, you know, we have to be vigilant for threats and dangers, and you know, it seems like we pick up on that, and especially if you watch the local news. I mean, it's just, you know, crisis after crisis. So anyway, we've got just a few more seconds. Anything to wrap up on this?
I mean, as far as the media, I don't really know.
Okay, well, we'll continue after the break. We just got a few seconds here, so we'll be back. Thank you.
Wow, have you guys seen this new app? It's supposed to tell you what your future is.
Really? What did it tell you?
It actually says I should be a police officer.
No way, let me see. It says I should be a firefighter.
Oh, give me that. What does it say to me? Well, that's weird. All it does is show me this picture. Look at that.
When it comes to telling the future, we all know there's no app for that. But at Pikes Peak Community College, you can get started on the right path and take control of your future today. In addition to programs in fire sciences and law enforcement, Pikes Peak Community College offers a variety of certificates and degrees to allow you to succeed in the world right now and prepare you for what lies ahead.
Hi, you must be our new student. Welcome to Pikes Peak Community College.
Check out your future online at ppcc.edu or call an advisor at 502-3232. Students succeed at Pikes Peak Community College.
This is a story about a boy, a girl, and the never-ending wonder of fate. The girl always wanted to be a dancer, and the boy always wanted to be a firefighter. As luck would have it, they enrolled at the same college, where the girl studied dance, and the boy studied fire science technology. One magical day, they met in math class, because no matter what your major, you need to take math. After graduation, the girl moved to the city to be a dancer, and the boy moved with her, because every city needs firefighters, and he had wanted to be one his whole life. With more than 200 programs, let Pikes Peak Community College help you find your passion. You never know where it might take you.
Welcome to our third segment of the program here. We were talking about, just the waves of information that come to us through the media and in this information age, and how we have to kind of have skills to sort through all that and make sense of it. Then we also were talking about how in our own upbringing, our own socialization, in our families and our culture, how at some point we have to really make those values our own and not just accept them from the authority figures around us or the culture, but critically assess those. And that sort of turns us kind of to a more inward focus of being aware of our own tendency to be influenced by stereotypes, rhetorical techniques, or even fallacies, or just heightened self-awareness of our own biases or blind spots. And maybe we could just explore that just briefly.
Yeah, I think that it's important to be able to recognize that we play games with optical illusions all the time. We know that our eyes can deceive us, that we see things that are not necessarily there, and it's the same for our thinking if we're not vigilant about it, if we don't question our own thoughts and biases. It's like driving a car without knowing where your blind spots are.
Very dangerous.
Very dangerous, absolutely. So I think it comes with the study of critical thinking, that you learn about the various biases and fallacies, and the first segment you were talking about, rhetoric, the things that people will use to try to persuade us to their way of thinking, and that we kind of have to develop within ourselves our own filter for the information that's coming into us, and know the strengths and weaknesses of those filters.
Okay, and then philosophy, the unexamined life is not worth living, or this heightened self-awareness.
Know thyself.
Know thyself, yeah, definitely.
As far as that goes, knowing yourself, I always use the whole analogy of react and respond. If you know yourself, if you are aware of your own biases, then you have more tendency to respond rather than to react. React is just thinking, or just, I wouldn't say responding because that would contradict what I said, but more of a reacting, just going with what you feel, rather when you respond, you're taking in and actually listening to what's going on, and also being aware of your own biases, your confirmation biases and cognitive biases, and that way you have a more educated way, or I should say more reasonable way to respond to something. So react and respond is always what I like.
Wow, you're talking about multitasking here, yeah.
I mean, if you get it down to like a quote-unquote science, then I guess it would just goes off second nature.
Yeah, but that self-awareness, I really like what you say about just going with the gut reaction, which is often driven by emotion, by passion, not really reflecting. You just blurt it out.
Right.
And even in relationships, critical thinking, you can get strong emotions going, and you don't talk to each other for several days. So critical thinking, all the way from governments to groups to families to couples, is very important. And so to be kind of, like you say, thoughtful and reflective, and be aware of what you're feeling at the time, and exercising some of your executive decision making and what you say and how you say it is very important.
And you can even use that towards making even bigger decisions, as in politics or whatever your views are, ideology, politics, whatever it may be. As for example, people tend to just throw out individual circumstances as to that are just too much empathy, too much sorrow on that, and people will go off that, where if you really know your biases, you really know, you really use critical thinking, you apply that to everyday life, then you are actually able to take that into consideration, going back to the Aristotle quote, and realize that that's just an individual experience. Yes, have empathy for that, but don't make a broad decision, broad policy.
You can't base facts on
You can't base facts on off of one instance.
Right, if I see a puppy with big sad eyes, you know, that always catches my attention, but that should not affect how I live my life or motivating behavior.
Yeah, we're choice-making beings, and in the world that we live in today, we have an infinite possibility of choices available to us at any given moment, and how do we make the best choices for ourselves and for those around us comes into this kind of this thinking, the critical thinking, the logic part of our brain that's going to tie things together and help us to make the best, healthiest decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, and you know, major decisions in life, you know, what you're going to do with your life, who you're going to hang with, who you're going to marry, or whatever. If you're going to join the military or not.
Yeah, that's
I mean, those are life-changing experiences. You better think them out.
And the critical thinking one, I believe the first question or the first segment was all about the rhetorical devices and persuading people. And one of the things that people need to learn how to do is, or how to persuade, or what really is persuasion. A lot of people rely on those biases and a lot of the emotions just to make a decision. Rather than actually thinking about what is your intent. If your intent is to persuade, then you really need to figure out how to actually persuade somebody intellectually rather than emotionally. That way it's not just a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
You need to learn, or at least be aware that it's about facts. It's about having some compassion, but don't act on that compassion. Act on the facts and compassion at the same time, and then you get some more sound decisions.
Besides puppies with the big eyes and appeals to pity and things like that. You know, our more intense emotions, you know, fear,
or even getting
scare tactics.
Asking why. If your intent is to persuade, then don't just come and yell at me. This is what you believe. If you're telling me your beliefs and your intent is to persuade, then tell me why. Don't just tell me what's going on. I want to know why.
What's the end goal
exactly.
in mind?
That's kind of showing. I like that. It gets into virtue and virtue. Showing respect. As an equal, you know.
Right.
You have your own experiences, your own thoughts, and I'm just not out there to convert you a body count, so to speak.
Exactly.
You know, I'm here to listen and maybe learn. And I like that ties in with your Aristotle quote, you know.
Yeah.
The mark of an educated person is to entertain other views without necessarily agreeing with them, but having an open mind, or having the courage to discuss hot button issues that we recoil from and yet are crucial in our political and our personal lives.
Right, and it's like I was discussing earlier with you. I believe that Majid Nawaz, a former extremist, now I guess you can say someone from the counter think tank, known as Quilliam Foundation, when he brought up Islam and stuff like that, more hot button issues, he used the Voldemort effect just to, you know, you don't bring it up because it's not politically correct or it's not, it makes people uncomfortable.
Right, the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room, yeah.
So
never talk about politics, never talk about religion.
Right, but nothing's ever going to get done if you don't. So
exactly, yeah. And so the critical thinking has kind of an ethos or an ethic below it that shows respect for other people. So anyway, yeah, we've covered a lot of things here, and my gosh, reason is kind of a fragile thing. It's a capacity to think and reason, but you know, it can be threatened by a lot of things. It can go by, we can be swayed by emotion, intimidation, things like that. So anyway, everybody, work on critical thinking. We're continually doing it. Thank you.